Hey, what's up guys, welcome back to the channel. On today's episode, we're talking about OEM blades, okay? What I mean by that is the blades the manufacturers give you when you buy the tool, okay? We've already burned through a lot of the blades, tools that we've already had before, but we do have two of the OEM blades that were included with the tool that we purchased previously. Luckily for y'all, we've already, tested the DeWalt blades and Milwaukee blades and other, major brand manufacturer blades. So if you buy two of those blades, you already know. But today we're going to be talking about the Bosch Edge Demolition Blade and the Flex Demolition Blade. Both of these blades were included with the tools when we bought them. Obviously, if you haven't seen the reviews on those tools, go check them out. But they're both 9-inch blades and they're both bimetal blades, okay? So you can also buy these blades separately in case you did need to get them, except for the Flex blade. You can't buy just the blade by itself, but you can buy it as a kit included with other blades. So it's probably worth testing these out, but the question is, are they really setting you up for success? That's what we're here to find out. So let's go take a closer look at the blades and then we'll get into testing. This right here is the Bosch Demolition Wooden Nails bimetal blade, and the model number on this one is RDN9V. This is a 5+8 TPI variable tooth pattern blade, and this blade is made in Switzerland, or Swiss made, let's say. This is the Bosch Edge blade, and with they're kind of trying to marketing towards, this is for extreme cuts. Okay, and as we talked about here, it's variable teeth pattern, so you kind of got big tooth there, big tooth there, small, 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 big, 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 small, 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 big, big. So it kind of varies throughout here, and as you can see, this here does have a fang tip. You can get a plunge cut with this, but because it's not offset way out, it's kind of hard to get that extreme angle, okay? So if you look at it this way, what's really doing a lot of the cutting is actually this first tooth here, and if you kind of go, this angle, at a severe angle, you can kind of get a little bit of this, but what's really doing the cutting is this sharpness point here, okay? On the back side of it, it will say this is for a tool with a max strokes per minute of 3,100. It's another blade that tells you what the maximum strokes per minute you should be using on this blade is. And if you look at the teeth offset, it's pretty aggressive, pretty standard for a Recip blade, nothing too special, but it does seem to work pretty well. And the kerf of this blade seems to be pretty standard. I want to say it's slightly less than full kerf, but it does seem to be pretty good, okay? So now moving on to this Flex blade, if I can grab it. So this is the Flex Blade 9-inch 6 TPI bimetal blade for demolition, and this is for wood with nails, okay? Model number on this one is FA202002, and like I mentioned earlier, 6 TPI, so all of these teeth are equally spaced out. This one also does have a fang tip here, so you can kind of get that plunge cutness if you want, but the teeth, the sharpness or the edges, or the micro edge on these teeth are nowhere nearly as sharp as the micro edge on these teeth. So if you look at the Bosch teeth here, you can see the Bosch teeth are like, super edgy. You get the super pointy tip there. But if you look at this Flex blade, and don't get me wrong, it has a pointy tip, but the sharpness of that tooth, or the micro edge of that tooth, is nowhere nearly as sharp as the Bosch, okay? And on this one, when you do the plunge cutting, you see because the blade is kind of set backwards, it's kind of curved backwards on an angle, you can kind of get it, get the plunge cut to work this way, but any extreme angle, you're just going to be getting this rounded point right here, okay? So this rounded point, not going to get too much. If you look on the back side of it, it will say nothing about, maximum speed or where it's made, but that is the Flex 9-inch blade, okay? And the kerf is pretty standard. I want to say it's probably full kerf or just barely slightly less. But if you look at the design, I'm not saying these are made in the same factory or anything like that. All the Recip blades generally follow this design. You kind of got the tang that kind of goes in and connects. And you kind of got, a few teeth here that really ever gets used on most Recip saws. And then, you kind of got this tapered edge, okay? So that's a pretty standard Recip blade. So now let's go take a look at what everybody really wants to know. How's the performance? All right, so let's take a look at some damage done to some of these blades, right? So this right here is obviously the Flex blade. And as you can see here with the pointy parts, you can tell that a lot of these pointy parts have just been rounded off by the hard fasteners, probably closer to the drywall screws, okay? If you look at the damage, try to look at the damage really closely, you can tell the pointy part that actually pulls the material out or does the cutting has been completely, you know, rounded off. So you could probably get through some part of the material if you're cutting like soft wood, like pine or something like that. But you're not really going to be cutting it too fast. You're just going to be ripping it apart, right? I mean, that's technically what the blade does. But if you look at it here closely, you know, the offset of the blade hasn't been damaged too much. But if you look at the pointy edges closely, they've definitely suffered a lot of rounded offness, okay? So that's the damage done to this blade. If you look at the Bosch blade, you know, depending on some of the results or how closely you pay attention to them, you'll be a little bit impressed by this blade. But a lot of the pointy parts here also on these bimetal blades have been rounded off, especially this part right here. I want to point out, if you can tell, that part has really been just, you know, rounded off to a point of, it's not even pointy anymore. It's just that piece of metal is just gone, right? So it's definitely been deformed. It can obviously tear through wood very slowly, as you saw on some of the clips, but you know, this bimetal blade has suffered a good amount of damage. If you look at it this way, you can really see that part of damage. But another good way to look at it is, if you look at the curve of these two blades, they're pretty much the same. They're pretty much full curve. But if you look at the damage on these blades, look at that. There you go. So hopefully that, you know, kind of sums up the wear on these blades. But as you can tell with the Bosch blade, if you compare like these teeth here to these teeth here, these teeth are completely worn out. So let's go take a look at the numbers. Just in case this is the first time you're watching this series or this video in this series, we test all the blades the same way, the same saw, the same user, same strategy, same number of fasteners, same type of fasteners, everything's the same. We tried to normalize the data to match as close as we can in real life, okay? So there's no unfair advantage. So take that, okay? So the Flex Demolition Blade FA202002 is the first blade that we tested. And then on the 16D framing nail test, on all three runs, it cut through all three just fine. And the average of 3 runs was 12.94 seconds, all right? Then we moved on to the drywall screw test because everybody knows drywall screws are incredibly hard. And then on with the blade, it pretty much failed after 2 screws cut, and then so that puts it at, you know, pretty much 38 total fasteners cut, okay? And just to remind you, we're saying failed is in terms of it's just sitting there for, you know, a really long time and not making any progress, or it's built up a good amount of smoke, okay? So with that being said, we moved on to the Bosch Edge Demolition Blade, the RDN9V. So the RDN9V did the 16D framing nail test just fine. It cut through all 36 nails, and the average of 3 runs was 14.62 seconds, okay? And then we moved on to the drywall screw test, and that became a really interesting story because in case you haven't seen it, which would be really weird because you're in this part of the video and you haven't seen what happened, it cut through all 12 drywall screws not just fine. But the long story short, to tell you what happened is, as soon as the blade started smoking up, before we were able to let off the trigger, it did finish cutting that fastener, and then it just kept going. And then on the next row of fasteners, it would start smoking, and then it would just finish cutting through. And then it would start smoking, just cutting through, finish, you know, start smoking and finish. So usually we would say, oh, look, it started smoking and we'll stop. But in this case, it just wasn't smoking long enough before it finished, so we just let it keep going. And it cut all 12 fasteners. Not fine, like we said earlier, because it took 303 seconds to cut 12 fasteners, okay? In case you don't know what that means, that's probably like a little over 5 minutes, okay? So we said we only ran it once, and then we said it failed, mainly because no, I guess, person, hopefully, is going to be sitting there trying to cut, you know, a header like that, you know, for 5 minutes. Because if you did, you're probably questioning your life choices and the blades that you purchased. So we only ran it once, and we said it cut 12 and you know, in about 5 minutes. So if you want to go ahead and say go look through the video again and manage your own data and try to figure that out, that's up to you. Feel free to go do that. So where do they stack up on the leaderboard? So the Flex Demolition FA202002, the bimetal blade, ends up in 15th place, right behind the Milwaukee Wrecker bimetal and right in front of the Spider wooden nails, bimetal plus cobalt blade, which had 37 fasteners cut. So Flex is right there between the Milwaukee and the Spider, but the Bosch Edge Blade tells a completely different story. So the Bosch Edge Blade with 48 fasteners cut comes in 5th place, displacing the Diablo Demo Demon Bimetal, which only had 43 fasteners cut, okay? So the Bosch Edge Demolition Blade is right behind the lowest ranked tungsten carbide blade, right, which is the DeWalt Extreme series, but displaces the Diablo Demo Demon, which is the fastest or the longest, let's just say longest lasting or most fasteners cut bimetal blade, okay? So it definitely shakes up the ranking with this blade, okay? So let's talk about the leaderboard for just a little bit, okay? So one way to look at the leaderboard is to figure out and say, how many fasteners did each blade cut, okay? So in the test that we run, we're running framing nails, which, you know, obviously are just nails. They're 16D nails, so, you know, they're not incredibly hard. And we're also running drywall screws, which are incredibly hard. So if you want to look at it in terms of which blade was actually the fastest in the nails, right? If you just sort the entire leaderboard by nails, you can see the Milwaukee Axe Bimetal had an average of 3 runs, cutting 36 nails around 10.42 seconds, right? And then you also got the Milwaukee Axe Carbide, which was also really fast with 12.48 seconds, right? And then you could say the Diablo Demo Demon, not then, but, you know, the Diablo Demo Demon, which was the longest lasting bimetal blade, which had, you know, 25 seconds on average. But, you know, if you take into account the Flex Blade, which actually had 12.94 seconds on average on just the nails, that's actually a pretty fast blade, okay? If you want to go back and look at some of the other episodes, you know, they're obviously all listed there. But the Flex Blade is a pretty good blade if you're cutting mainly just softer material, right, like nails. But if you're going to run into like structural screws or drywall screws or anything like that, you probably do not want to be using that blade, okay? So if you go look at the Bosch Edge Blade, you know, obviously in the nails part, it took about 14.62 seconds on average to cut through all of those. And if you look at all the other ones on the leaderboard, that's probably also still fast too. The Bosch Edge Blade has a variable teeth design, going from, you know, 5 plus 8 TPI kind of varying. So both of these blades are good if you're cutting, you know, softer material. But once you get into structural screws or drywall screws or anything like that, then the Bosch Edge is definitely the better blade, okay? So, you know, is it worth it? Let's go look at the cost. The Bosch Edge Blade comes in right around $5-ish. You can buy them individually or you can buy them as a pack, obviously, in the retailers that sell them. But in the store that we saw them, the brick and mortar store, they were roughly around $5, okay? The Flex Blade, like we mentioned earlier, they don't sell this individual blade just by itself, or at least we haven't seen it, but you can get it in a pack, and if you average out the cost of the blade per pack, it comes out around $3 or $4, okay? So that's also something to be said here. All right, so what can we say about these blades? Do the manufacturers include good blades when you're buying the tools, okay? So some tools, or if you look at the leaderboard, if you want to get the fastest cutting blade, you can also argue yes, because Bosch does kind of include this blade in their profactor saw. But, you know, depending on the Milwaukee tools or DeWalt tools or Makita tools or whatever you're getting, you're probably going to be getting a different blade, okay? So the good news is most of the manufacturers who are selling you the tool usually include a blade, and those blades are usually probably one of the most cost-effective blades they can get to you, okay? Bosch does make a really cheaper version of, you know, a demolition blade, as we've tested in previous episodes. They also make, you know, non-edge branded lineup, but Flex doesn't really have different lineups, right? They kind of have the Flex lineup, and then they have, I think they do make a carbide series, but that is not included in the reciprocating saw that we purchased from them. So with that being said, it's good news, or disclaimer to point out, we purchased all of these blades, obviously, and, you know, no manufacturer was contacted, or they did not sponsor this video, let's say. So to answer the question, do they include pretty good blades? I think most manufacturers do, because they don't want to have, you know, people think, oh, this tool sucks because the blade they included in it isn't the best. But, you know, they don't always include the best blade, because most people are under the impression the best blades are actually made by a certain brand. won't say. Okay, so everybody has their preferences. So if you're buying, you know, the Bosch tool, you're getting a pretty good blade with it, but I would not make a tool purchasing decision on one blade they've included with the tool. If you're buying a Flex tool, the Flex blade they've included is pretty good for demo for wood with nails, but not wood with screws. So depending on what you're cutting, just figure out what blade you want to use. Like I said, all this information is here in the leaderboard, so if you want to check it out and rearrange it differently because you care about the fastest cutting on nails only, then feel free to do that. Otherwise, hope this video helped you guys out. Hope you have a great day. Get back to working, and we'll see you guys next time.